So in this video I'm gonna show you how to do a proper 100% closed transfer of beer from fermenter to keg. And why do we need to do a closed transfer? Well, because if we don't, the beer will taste like shh. If your beer is a really hoppy beer, you need to do a closed transfer. Otherwise, the beer will get oxidized when you transfer it from fermenter to keg. And oxidized beer tastes really bad. It gets a taste like a rotten pineapple or wet cardboard. Not good. So a few weeks ago I kegged an IPA and this is how I did it. First of all, I have topped my keg with water. It's full, and now I'm gonna put in some Star San. What we're going to do now is to push the Star San solution out of the keg. We're going to push it out with CO2. That way we have exchanged the Star San solution with CO2 in the keg. So before we start our closed transfer, we have to make sure the keg is completely free from oxygen and replaced by CO2. On with the lid. So now we have to push out the Star San solution with CO2. Here I have my CO2. And I will start applying some pressure. And you need a hose and a ball lock like this. Because now we're pushing the Star San out with CO2 and in our bucket here. This way we can be pretty sure that there's no oxygen, but instead CO2 in the keg when it's empty. Now I filled my Star San bucket for later use, and now the rest just goes in the sink. The price for the CO2 that we're using here to do this is it's a small price to pay to ensure that you get not oxidized beer. When it's not that much Star San left in the keg, I'll take a little shake to ensure that everything gets Star San. Okay, it's getting empty. You can hear the sound. Woohoo! Okay. Empty. Free from oxygen, just CO2. Almost. Of course, there's a little bit of oxygen here. It's not possible to get 100% out. So here's our beer. It's been cold crashing for 3 or 4 days. Before I start cold crashing, I close the valve on top of my fermenting vessel here to prevent suckback of air. Cold liquid and cold air compresses. It takes up less space and the air will get sucked in. Therefore, I close the valve. And on the top here you can see it has imploded. Therefore, I have to push CO2 in the fermenter. Bring on the Star San. This maneuver takes a bit of practice. But when you do it right, It's like a balloon, you just blow it up. The star sand in my keg has, I guess it's a bit star sand in the bottom of my keg now, so I will just connect this picnic and push the last bit of star sand out. More space for beer and less star sand. When I'm doing a closed transfer like this, I put a scale underneath my keg. I do that for two reasons. Reason number one is to see how full the keg is, obviously. Since the beer is cold crashed, you can also see the condensation on the outside of the keg, so you will kind of know how full it is anyways. The second reason is to see that the beer is flowing. Just to see the weight of the keg is rising. Sometimes when you're kegging a dry hopped beer like this, the transfer can stop because of the hop residues. The first beer that comes out is quite cloudy, so throwing this away. Lots of hop residues. Now it starts to look better, so now I will keg. Oh, wow, that smell. Super fresh. Pineapple hits me straight away. I think this will be the bomb. Star sand, everything, always. Everything I'm using now, I have star sand. Just dry fitting it at first. There's a bit of pressure in the keg now, that's important. So I'm just starting to push the beer line. And the CO2 will come out of this tiny little hole. And the same thing with the CO2 line. Can you hear that sound? This way I will flush both hoses and release the pressure from the keg. You cannot have pressure in your keg when you're doing a closed transfer. Okay, I can now hear that the pressure is getting lower. Once I hear it drops down, I will switch both of these around. Beer goes down the keg and the CO2 from the keg goes on top here. And I can see on my scale that some beer goes in the keg and that it has not stopped. It does not go very fast, but it's getting there. So that's one of the downsides about the closed transfer. At first you need some extra CO2 to push that star sand solution out. Then it takes a bit of time to set this up with the hoses, and you have to do things in order. Finally, it's finished. It took about 1 hour to fill this keg. So let's disconnect and move our keg in the kisser. And it's a top loader. my 4 kilo CO2 tank, and I got 3 regulators. The third regulator goes into this manifold, which has the same pressure to 4 of the kegs, and the first 2 regulators I can individually set. So let me pick one of. Okay, this is the first regulator. Push it on in, and I'll force carbonate on 2 bars or 30 psi. And I'll just wait to connect the beer line till the beer is carbonated. Okay, that's it. It looks great. And now I will let the beer settle for about a week before tasting. And today there is exactly 4 weeks since I kegged the beer. And it's on my number 1 tap here. So let's look at the beer. A nice glass of orange juice. Do you hear that sound? That's not my belly. I have some beer fermenting right there. 4 weeks in the keg, and this is my hazy IPA. And if I have done things right, there will be no oxidized aromas or taste in this beer. You can already see it in the color. If the beer was oxidized, it would get a darker color, because oxidized beer rusts like metal. Metal corrodes, and this just oxidizes. Okay, let's pick up on the aromas. It still has that nice aroma of pineapple. There is no sign of oxidation from the aromas. That's sign number 2. Yep, lovely IPA. Absolutely no hint or sign of oxidation. And believe me, my nose would have picked up a glass of oxidized beer from the other side of a bar. This is not oxidized. So you might ask, why don't you just always do a close transfer? Well, I don't, because I think that some beers just don't need to be close transferred. Stouts, porters, or any lager that's not very hoppy. It takes longer time to do a close transfer than just pouring the beer right in the keg, and it also requires some extra CO2 usage. Yep, that's it. That's how I do a closed transfer of my beer. If you don't have the exact same equipment as me, the principles of the process can be transferred to any similar homebrew equipment. So that's it from me this time. I hope I will see you again in some other episode of the next batch, but until then, goodbye.